What do we mean by alignment?
Alignment, actually, we used to call this, I suppose, a couple of years ago. One of the big cries generally was joined up business. We need to get our business units joined up. And I suppose that's the word alignment is probably now the catchy word for actually what that means. I always think of it as, I think of the Red Arrows flight formation team, and I tend to think of flying in close formation and having our business units for one goal trying to fly in close formation. It's such a huge issue at this moment in time because if we look at what has happened over the last couple of years with the pressure on every business, with all the recessional issues in the greater sphere of economics, and everybody's under pressure for revenues, everybody's looking at cost structures because the costs are out of line with the revenues, and there's restructuring going on. The natural thing to do is people sink back into their silos, because their silos or their departments are generally pretty safe places to be. So that's the place to hide in the silo. Now what then happens is the silos tend to be remunerated and assessed on what they achieve against their individual objectives. So a lot of departments or functions or silos, as we call them, are working very much with sort of blinkers on today. We're achieving our objectives, we're doing well, therefore we're safe, aren't we? And the fact that the overall business may be under pressure, people still feel, well, I'm still pretty safe because we're achieving what we need. And once we're done with that, then we just throw it over the wall. And if somebody catches it the other side of the wall, that's great. And if they don't, well, that's unfortunate. Well, unfortunately, that's not okay. Because in the greater proposition, from a customer perspective, the customer is going to be disappointed in some way. Either the service is not good enough, either the product is not good enough, the relationship perhaps with the client or customer is not good enough, because the client is the one person who will see the gaps in the whole proposition. So the challenge today, or one of the big challenges today, and particularly after some level of restructuring that has gone on, is that they have to actually pull these departments and functions together. They have to get them flying in close formation. Now, that's all very fine and easy to say. It's not quite so easy to do. And what companies have to do is they have to sort of look at the sort of wider need, the wider proposition, and then split it down into how do we respond to that need? What really happens from the time that the customer talks to us or tries to book a product or tries to buy a product or a service? What actually happens right across our organization, ultimately to the loop that actually goes back to the customer with the product or service or both? And therefore they have to examine that. They then have to completely reconfigure how they do objectives. As I said earlier, objectives tend to have been done on a functional or department basis. As a function, sales or marketing or risk or new product development or whatever, you are going to be assessed on achieving these objectives over the year. And within that, there will be individual objectives, and those will all go towards whether you as an individual get paid a bonus or not at the end of the year. That's a generalization, but pretty much what happens. Now, unfortunately, that's completely out of line at the moment, because in order to align silos and departments, you have to think in a wider scale about overall objectives. So going back to the customer proposition and taking it one step removed, you have to look at objectives in a completely different way. Right down, of course, to individual objectives, but they're horizontal. They're much more horizontal rather than vertical. And once you've got those objectives completely reconfigured, then you have to completely reconfigure your remuneration strategy, so that you don't end up with Department A's done really well and achieves its objectives and everybody's got a bonus, but actually we've upset the customer, we haven't delivered to the customer. That's just not okay. So you have to look at it in a much more circumspect and in a wider context, and you have to completely rewire remuneration. Now, it's not just process and configuration and remuneration that's going to get you aligned. There's a massive leadership job here. So the senior leaders in the business have to enact and behave in a way that demonstrates the business becoming much more aligned themselves, even at board level. I often do a lot of work with boards, and even in the boardroom, the directors within that boardroom are completely non-aligned. They're competing with one another in certain ways, but they're certainly not aligned. So unless we get alignment right from the top, it's highly unlikely you're going to get it in other parts of the business. So the leaders of the business, the executive teams and the senior management teams, have to look at their own behavior as leaders. What messages and signals are they sending to the organization, and even out to the customer groups and to the customers themselves, that this is a joined up business. It's the power of we. We can deliver this, and we're very clear who we are. So leadership plays a huge part in all of this, going right back to feedback mechanisms about how we can become more aligned, how we can speed up our delivery systems to the customer, how we can excite the customer in much more ways. Those are where the winners are going to be at the end of the day, because the customers are under pressure too. So it's not just the people who make products and have to deliver products, whether it's an investment banking or the ABC company that makes widgets. It doesn't matter. The customers, everybody is under pressure. So when they're making a choice about who they want to work with, who they want to buy products from, they're going to be making those choices not just on price and whether the product works. There's so many other things. But are we easy to do business with? Is it a delight to do business with this organization? Are they fast? Do they follow up to deliver on the promise? All of that sort of stuff actually emanates from whether the business is aligned or not. So it's a big, big challenge today. It's an important challenge today, but it's critical to get it right. So apart from the technical sides of how the process works internally, there's a massive leadership job to be done. And most organizations have to unwind completely how they've done business in the past. And it should start right from the customer and work all the way back. And they actually physically need to test it. So what happens at this point? Who hands over that part of the business to whom? And what do they do with it? And who do they hand over to? And then you start to examine it. But it's critical. Unless we get it right, you're going to lose. If you get it right, you're going to win. And it really is as simple as that.